Right. Welcome to House TRW, day one. First committee for me to run, so bear with me. We're going to start out here by calling roll, and then I'll get into a little spiel about how we're going to run this meeting.
Representative Campbell. Representative Connolly.
Here.
Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Representative Jarvis.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Here.
Representative Thayer.
Present.
Representative Wharf.
Here.
Chairman Byron.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome again to House Travel, TRW, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, Cultural Resources. We have a decorum that we've all talked about and a script we're supposed to read, but I'm going to channel my inner Representative Newsom, and she always would say, be nice or leave. Be kind, be civil. Please work through the chair as you come up and give testimony. Please silence your phones and my committee as well. I remind myself to do that. They can be distracting, and if your phone does go off, just sneak outside, take the call. We are going to run testimony in order of operation. Goes electeds, agency, in person, and then we'll go to Zoom as appropriate. As I always like to say, please keep it brief, to the point. And that's what I have to get the ball rolling. Our first bill this afternoon is going to be House Bill 45. And uniquely, in the chair position, it's my own bill. So usually I'd run down there and run it that way, but because Representative Harshman had to sneak out of town for a few days, I'm going to go ahead and run it from up here. So let's go ahead and open comments from if we have members of the House or Senate or electeds in the body to go ahead and comment on House Bill 45, which is removing otters as protected animals.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Storer.
I would ask that you would present the bill first
Okay.
before we take comments.
Okay, I can go ahead and present the bill from this chair. So literally is the shortest bill I have ever been involved with. On line 1, it removes the word otter from statute 23-1-101. And what it does is removes that protection for otters, and it allows the intent of the bill, as the drafter and bringer of the bill, is to allow the Game and Fish the tool to manage that animal if and when appropriate. And that is the extent of the bill. If there's any questions on me, I'm happy to answer them. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us some background on impetus and why you wanted to bring the bill?
Yes, thank you, Representative Provenza. It's a constituent bill. I've been asked since the bill got filed frequently, who's behind it, are trappers behind it, are others behind it. But this is a constituent bill that came out of North Lincoln County and South Teton County, and actually up in Representative Storer's district, from two different folks that were having troubles with otters in their waterways, not stocked waterways, naturally flowing waterways. And we looked at what they could do about them, and as they sit in this statute, you cannot do anything about them. So it was a bill I drafted probably late in the summer, my first bill, and that's where it came from, and that's everything behind it. There's been a lot of misinformation about it coming from a special interest group or any specific folks, but I can tell you that is the history behind the bill. Now we will open it up for public comment. Let's start with, if any members of the House, Senate, or electeds would like to speak on the bill, please feel free to come up now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak.
Please announce yourself and.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am Mike Schmid, State Representative from House District 20, Sublette County and portion of Lincoln County. I'm here to speak in favor of this bill and as a co-sponsor of the bill for the very same reasons, Chairman, you expressed. It's a constituent bill. We've talked to people in my district about the rivers and creeks in Sublette County that are, their otters are becoming a very common occurrence. A lot of fishermen are concerned. I've also had comments from private landowners with private fish ponds that are having problems with otters to the point where they're not stocking anymore because they're basically tired of feeding the otters. So the otters seem to be doing well in my part of the state. I did speak with the regional office of the Game and Fish there. They seemed in support of this bill as well. They indicated the same things. They're getting a lot of otter complaints from private landowners, heard some from the fishermen, and also some otters come in from beaver trappers. And the comment was made by the supervisor there that it's kind of sad that we can't do anything with those things as those people bring them in. So the otter population seems to be doing well in my part of the state. So that's the reason I'm here today. And the bill is just to give Game and Fish the authority to take a look at the otters, to study them, and determine what the next step should be, if any, on their part. So
Thank you, Representative Schmidt. Do we have any questions from the committee for Representative Schmidt? Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Schmidt. Great to have you here. I'm just curious if you can help us out with any biological, historical information on the otter population, especially in our part of the northwest part of the state, or should we look to Game and Fish for that information?
I think Game and Fish, if there's any available, Game and Fish would be the source for that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you.
I think at this time, not seeing any other colleagues, let's run to the agency. Please fill some chairs and welcome Director Bruce. Congratulations. That happened since, I believe, our last TRW meeting.
Good morning. Is it still morning? No, it's afternoon, isn't it? Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and representatives. Good to be here. I'm Angie Bruce, Director of Game and Fish. I brought with me today my Deputy Director, Doug Bremeyer. Most of you know him, and he replaced me in my previous position. And then a new face for you, Dan Smith. He previously was the supervisor out of Cody for the Wildlife Division, and now he's our new Wildlife Chief and Chief Game Warden. So definitely brought some very valuable experienced backup to help me with this conversation today. So yeah, let's talk about this otter bill. And if I can go ahead, Chairman, and just dive right in. I want to talk about what this bill does and what it doesn't do. And really, as the chairman says, it removes the protected status of otters in the state, and therefore they would then be defined as non-game wildlife in accordance with our Chapter 52. So what does that mean? It still would remain not part of a hunting or trapping season. I think that's very valuable information to note. And if the populations ever got to that level that was warranted, there'd be another action under Chapter 4 that we'd have to go through for that to be possible. So what does Chapter 52 allow us to do? It allows us to have take for non-game wildlife, which this would be non-game, in conflict situations. So as the Representative Schmidt talked about, is when we're having otter issues with landowners and others, we would able to offer a Chapter 56 permit to handle those unique situations, very specific to that time and place. And then a little bit more about otters in Wyoming. As with most of the states, in the mid-50s, you saw very little otters across the nations. They were almost completely extirpated in Wyoming, however, still remained up with the national parks area in northwest Wyoming. After they were protected in 1953, you started to see their population spread. So obviously out from the park and down the western side of the state, you also saw some increase from the southern state coming up from Colorado. Are they repopulated in the entire state? No. They're pretty rare to see at all in the eastern part. In one of the scientific papers we've divided the state into 28 segments, and we could say that they're back into 14 of them. So at this point in time, we don't foresee the commission going any step further into Chapter 4. More research, more data, more monitoring to watch as they spread. But this, exactly like the chairman said, this would give us a tool to handle those conflict situations. And just to wrap up before we stand for questions is, we really want to see otters repopulate to historic times, but we do know as wildlife managers in the state, that we don't have the tools to deal with conflict, we get a lot of folks who therefore don't support otters moving around the state. So having this tool, in my perspective, allows us to help gain public support for more otters. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I think it's appropriate this time to go to our committee. Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is dealing with the conflict, is this going to be incidental take from a trapper? Or are we talking about the department actually maybe catching these live traps and relocating them? That's the only question I had in my mind is, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I assume that in the event that the decision was made that you were going to trap them and relocate, that would be something that's done through the commission, that have public process, all that stuff would be in place. So it's not, I want to make it clear because I don't want to hurt the bill. I just want to understand, because if in fact, I would like to see otters everywhere. I mean, I think they're cooler than you know what, but that's the question I just have is, tell us what that process would be. Are you talking about lethal removal in conflict situations, or are you talking about live trap? If it's live trap, where are we putting them? And under what process do the people in the state know how this department's handling that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Byron, Representative Worf. It's kind of a combination of all of those things. And so if we had a conflict situation, the first thing we'd want to do is have some department investigation into that conflict to make sure that it is a true conflict. If there's some kind of mitigation we could do without having to take further action. If further action is needed, we could do that through Chapter 56, whether the first step could be to try to relocate them to somewhere else if there's a suitable place, or if that's not an option, then we could do lethal removal. But there would be a lot of tools that we could use under the non-game section.
Yeah, follow up.
Follow up. So just so everybody's clear, if in fact there is going to be a situation where the department is doing a live trap and a relocation, is that something that will be put out publicly so that, because I know you're not just going to go dump them in somebody's backyard, and I want to make sure the committee understands how you function, but could you maybe say what that process would be if in fact you have a conflict and it's determined that you need to trap and relocate rather than extinguish them, what that process would entail? Thank you.
Chairman Byron, Representative Worf, that's a great question. And so the process, it normally would not be a public process when we issue a Chapter 56 permit, but we would not release otters anywhere without the cooperation of the landowners and neighboring landowners, because obviously when you release an otter somewhere, it's not likely to stay right where you put it. And so before we would move and release an otter anywhere, we would have a lot more conversations. It may not go through a public process, a direct public process, but we would definitely engage landowners and the people surrounding that area before we make any movement like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Connolly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. What would be your priority then with this tool? Would you look at doing some live trapping first rather than just go out and terminate a troubled otter? So can you answer that for me?
Chairman Byron, Representative Connolly, yeah, we'd want to take steps to live trap it first and try to find a different location for it where maybe it's not going to get into the same trouble it's in where it's at. lethal removal of an otter would probably be our last choice. We would want to take other steps first.
Thank you. Representative Campbell.
Authority. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. So question from a constituent, and I just want to make sure I understand, because right now, the question was, what measures might, owners of fish ponds, what measures can they take to mitigate otters from occasionally snacking in their ponds? My understanding is that right now, there's nothing they can do because they're protected. So by removing them from the protected list, then there might be measures they could work with the Game and Fish to then mitigate some of that tasting. So that's my question, I guess.
Chairman Byron, Representative Campbell. Sorry, I'm going to stumble over my words all of a sudden. So yes, right now we don't have a lot of tools to try to deal with it because we can't lethal remove them, we can't trap them, we can't do that. So what we've done, for example, in the Coyote region is we've tried to have the landowner try to set electric fence in a place if there's a particular place they're coming in. So we try different mitigation things. They may work short term, but they don't work long term. So it really is a challenge to figure out what can we do in a conflict situation. And so if a landowner is having a problem, the first thing they should do is contact their local Game and Fish representative, either a game warden, biologist, regional supervisor, and start talking through the problem. If we can't find a way to mitigate that problem, that's when we would look at issuing a permit to try to take the next step, whether it's live trapping or additional hazing or whatever we would try to do to take that next step. And this would give us the tool to do that.
Thank you. Committee, any more questions? Representative Connolly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how do you determine how many otters are too many otters? In one person's mind, 2 might be something that the otters need to be delisted. And another person, it might be 100 because they're not having an issue. So is there any kind of way to just say, we've got a trigger for a number that would be helpful to you?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to tackle that one, Representative. Welcome to Wildlife Management 101, a challenge we face every day on that social balance of how much wildlife we want on the landscape in coexisting with the public who live, in our great state. So that's always a tough one. I think in this situation, it'll be extremely situational. And when we have folks approaching our field staff and saying, I have an issue, I'm having damage or whatever it is, we'll set up some protocol for our field staff to help determine what exact tools to work with the landowner on. We do this all the time with many species, even ones we don't manage, maybe like grizzly bears, where we have a set protocol on how we deal with it. But as far as setting that exact population, as the otters grow throughout the state over the next decade, which I hope they will, we'll be looking at that. We'll be continuously, I think one thing this bill has done is shown the emphasis on wanting us to get more information across the state. So as they repopulate, trying to assess when that population is at that threshold that maybe the next step is needed. Very important. I can't give you an exact number, but we do have a process in place to evaluate that.
Thank you, Representative Connolly, for the question. Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what can you tell me about the population of otters in Northwest Wyoming over the last 40 years?
Chairman Byron and Representative Storr. So a lot of it's anecdotal. So in the last few years, our folks have started to work with the university, and I think with Dr. Murav on how to monitor some of the streams. And that's where Angie mentioned that 14 of our 28 units in the state, where we divided the state into UTM quadrants. We've documented them. So it's somewhat anecdotal. We can't quantify the total numbers, but we know that drainages have them. And according to Representative Connolly asked the question, how do we know when an area has too many? Those animals move pretty long distances, and so the places they're at right now are pretty ideal habitat. And so our ability to have some tools to remove individuals from those areas will help to alleviate some of that frustration some individual landowners will have. But right now, they're in some pretty ideal habitats, and we know that those areas where they're distributed now, there's pretty likely there's other animals further upstream or downstream that will come back in, and those landowners will learn to have some tolerance, but we'll be able to address individual cases of that. So right now, we don't have numbers, but we'll continue to work on that.
Representative Storr.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Thank you, sir. So I'm just going to throw a couple things out. One is, so a trapper can take a otter as a non-target species. Is that correct?
Chairman Byron, Representative Storr. So right now, they can't actively trap for otters, but there are occasions of incidental take, yes.
Right. And, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. And my understanding is that the number of otters that have been, what do we call, bycatch, we call it in fisheries, but non-targeted species, I guess, we call it in trapping. Those numbers have been pretty consistent over the last 40 years, I believe.
Yeah, I believe from talking to our fur bearer working group, so we have a group of folks that are kind of experts in that field, that we look at about 4 animals per year on average, 3 to 4, that are incidentals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would argue, I think, that the population is stable, which is good, but perhaps not increasing. I'm curious also, what kind of fish are being stocked in these ponds in Teton County especially? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman and Representative Storr, so folks that have a pond need to have a permit that's approved through our folks, and in western Wyoming, they're mostly going to be the cutthroat trout. So they have to have the native fishery stocked in those areas. In other parts of the state, there might be some rainbow and some other things. There's a little more latitude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Storr. And that is my understanding in our neck of the woods. Representative Storr and I share a boundary line. It is the native fish in our neck of the woods that the stocking is allowed. Committee Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so with the cutthroat trout, the greatest threat to them has been other species of invasive trout, right? Not necessarily river otters.
Chairman Byron, Representative Provenza, that's correct. And habitat, yes.
Committee, any further questions? Thank you, Director and staff, appreciate it, from Game and Fish. We will go to any other agency that may want to comment on House Bill 45. Seeing none. If you are here to testify publicly on House Bill 45, please go ahead and fill the seats. Get teed up in the queue so we can keep the meeting moving quickly. There's 4 seats up here, so if you'd like to make some public comment on House Bill 45, please remember to introduce yourself and who you are or the organization you may or may not be representing. Just for my first committee, I'm going to go from my left to your right to my left. So that'll just confuse all the Zoom users. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Anna Kaufman. I'm with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I will keep it brief. As you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the Federation just wanted to voice their support for this bill. We believe wholeheartedly in the agency's ability, or the department's ability, to use the tools in their toolbox wisely, to increase social carrying capacity for otters in the state, and to be judicious about what they choose to do. So we wanted to support this bill and putting some tools back in the toolbox for our department.
Thank you for those comments. Committee, any questions? Appreciate it.
Chairman Byron and members of the TRW, my name is Donald O'Toole. I'm a retired veterinarian. I live in Laramie. I oppose this bill. I think it's premature. I'm puzzled that an effort is being made at this time to remove river otters from Wyoming's protected wildlife list. I've always understood that decisions about wildlife are best guided by scientific data. And a lot of the data that's used by Game and Fish is passively acquired. My question is, what real data does Game and Fish have to support delisting otters? And what is its recommendation to you? There are objective data in the Wyoming Diversity Database, and they show that in the last 71 years, that's how long I've been alive, otters have made a slow and limited recovery in Wyoming, unlike other states. And there's ecological reasons for that. They're coming out of Yellowstone and slowly recolonizing part of their historic habitat. They don't have much of a presence in the eastern half of the state, as has been stated, and they have a very limited presence in the North Platte. Now, contrary to what I've heard some people say, I understand that this bill originated with complaints from Lincoln County that otters are getting into people's stocked ponds. And these ponds are in historic otter habitat. And my question is, what are the owners of these ponds doing to keep otters out of their private property? Some onus falls on them. And there are established methods to do this. And you don't need to delist otters to keep them out of ponds. The loudest cry that I heard to delist otters, and this was information provided to the Game and Fish Commission, is from the trapping community. I hate to think we're about to lift protections from a species that was extirpated in multiple states just so someone gets to hang a trophy pelt on their wall. I think we need a little science. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. O'Toole, thank you for your testimony. Committee, questions? Representative Campbell. End it with a question. Do you agree?
So first, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for being here and for making the drive over. I guess a clarifying question is your understanding or opposition in Wyoming, our Game and Fish Department taking this course of action? I mean, is that your understanding, that the request comes from our Game and Fish to delist otters?
No, my understanding is that, as Chairman Byron said, he was getting complaints from people who own stocked ponds, and they want additional tools to control the problem. And my question to them is, what have they done to protect their ponds?
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Campbell. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole, for the answer. Committee, any more questions for Mr. O'Toole? Hearing none, appreciate you making the drive over. We're going to carry on.
Thank you, Chairman Byron and committee members. My name is Merav Ben David, and I have been studying otters of various species across the world since 1984. I have been studying otters in North America since 1990, and I'm in Wyoming since 2000. I'm considered currently the world expert on North American river otters globally. Thanks to funding from the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and other sources, I've conducted 4 large studies of river otters across Wyoming and published our work, provided all information, including population estimates, across the state to the department. I have to say that I oppose the bill because I believe it's very much premature to open river otters to removal, either through live trapping or through deadly means. To give you some estimates of the situation in western Wyoming, in Sublette and Lincoln counties, which I personally been to in all the surveys we've conducted, river otters use scent mark stations, we call them latrine sites, please don't. They use defecation and urination to scent mark, so like dogs. So we call them latrines. And we've surveyed since 2001 the Green River and the lakes around and tributaries. And back in 2010 and 2011, we had more than double the number of latrines on the Green River than we had in 2021. And we also monitor how many scats there are. These are indicators of otter activity. And we are at 25, in 2021, we had 25% of otter activity at these latrines compared to what we had a decade ago. So the population is not stable, and probably we are seeing some of the water flow issues in our rivers translate into fish abundance and otter abundance. As Dr. O'Toole mentioned, otters have, and Director Bruce mentioned, river otters, our genetic data shows that river otters were extirpated from all of Wyoming except the Yellowstone National Park. And from there, they slowly, over the 71 years, colonized the Snake River. From the Snake River, they have moved through the Hoboken Junction into the Upper Green River, and from also from Yellowstone to the Upper Shoshone, and recently to the Upper Wind. The otters in the main stem of the Green River probably originated from a successful reintroduction in Utah. They are different genetically, so we have two actually distinct subpopulations of otters in the Green River Basin. To give you an idea of how rare they are, even in western Wyoming, I will tell you that we have surveyed, in addition to sections of the Green River, as I mentioned above, we surveyed all the lakes, Willow, Fremont, Half Moon, the two New Fork lakes, Boulder Lake, and the two Green River lakes, by the way, a gorgeous place. There is no otter sign in these areas as of 2021 and 2022. So river otters are slowly clawing their way back. Their existence is tenuous, depending on water flow, fish abundance, and pollution. And one of the main reasons we probably don't have otters, many otters, we have anecdotal observations in eastern Wyoming, is water flow issues with diversions and dams, and also pollution. I would suggest that any conflict between pond owners or landowners and river otters will be addressed without removal of otters. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Do you mind repeating your last name?
My last name is Ben David.
Thank you, Mrs. Ben David. I wanted to get that right as a new chairman. I
you.
appreciate that comment, committee. Representative Worf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ben David, I guess I would ask you, you say that the conflict can be resolved without removal. How would you propose this conflict would be resolved without the removal of the river otter?
So the conflict is mainly, as I understand it from the non-game biologists who are in touch with me and we work together closely, is stocked fish ponds. And the main issue there is access, where you put your fish pond, how far from the river it is, how you plumb it, and whether you put an electric fence around it will make a huge difference. I was involved in a study after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, where we had captive otters at the Alaska Sea Life Center in Seward, where we kept them in enclosures with an electric fence for 11 months. So it's possible. and I'll be happy to help anybody design those. Thank you.
Follow-up, Representative Worf.
Thank you, because I appreciate you coming and talking, because I know my background, I'm a wildlife biologist too, and I can tell you, I know from experience, usually when you tend to have conflict, it's when you're starting to have populations that are being concentrated, and they're not either capable or they're not able to disperse any further than they are. And I guess I can tell you, when I came here, I was a no vote, okay? But having listened, if this is gonna create an opportunity for us, rather than killing otters that are in an area where they're maybe overwhelming the available habitat, I would much rather see an effort put into perhaps relocating them to other areas. I think that's great if we can work with, the people who own ponds that have their stocked fish ponds, because I just don't want to leave them without a solution. So I think that's one of the things, but I think ultimately what I understand this bill does, and I'll reserve that for when we talk about the bill. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but thank you. I wanted to know how you would resolve that conflict.
Wouldn't you agree? Thank you, Representative Worf. I did see Representative Provenza's hand up, so please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Ben David. Do you have research on impacts of trapping or just like different policy changes by state and what that does to populations or, just any scientific data on maybe the impacts of what we're doing?
Thank you, Representative Provenza and Chairman Byron. Yes, we actually just completed a very large modeling effort on the effects of trapping on otter populations in Alaska. We modeled, this is taking our long-term data since 1989, Exxon Valdez oil spill, and all the trapping information from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And we have modeled effects of climate change, oil spills, various types, and harvest in addition, so multiple stressors, which is what we are facing in Wyoming right now with water availability. We have much significantly lowered water flow and affecting fish. So our model in Alaska shows that harvest can be detrimental, prevent otters from recovering from oil spills, and so I think at the status of the population in Wyoming, which is way, way lower than what we have in Alaska, and the reproductive output will be lower and the population growth rate will be lower. If I compare the abundance in Alaska to what we have in Wyoming, I think it will be a big mistake in removing otters or opening the possibility of removal, especially deadly removal. And if I may answer, Chairman, if I can answer what Representative Worf said, there has been several proposals over the years by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department to reintroduce otters to the Platte River and the Bighorn River. Well, they're missing, and they should be. We have some of the best fisheries, Miracle Mile, Gray Reef, Bighorn out of, so we have great fisheries in these rivers, and it doesn't make sense that we don't have otters, except for anecdotal dispersals. I would hesitate to transfer otters within Wyoming without knowing why there is no natural recolonization. What is the reason the Bighorn River does not have river otters? And I have been on that river multiple times doing river otter surveys. They're not there. The one otter we identified with a survey we just finished in 2023, thanks to funding from the Game and Fish, was also observed by a fisherman. That animal is never seen again. So we have occasional dispersals. Why don't they establish viable populations in places like the Bighorn? So taking animals from the Green River and moving them to the Bighorn will only be probably, until we understand why they're not there now and how come they haven't made it up for Montana, for example, it will be a mistake to move them around because we don't know why they're not there, and it's probably because of pollution.
I'm going to jump. I saw, okay, Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question, I believe. So you mentioned earlier, and one I just really appreciate, I mean, the depth of knowledge and expertise you bring to this conversation. Thank you. You mentioned delisting them right now, removing them from protected status is premature. So in your, from your background, what is that benchmark that we might look for to know it's not premature?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, Representative Campbell. I appreciate it, Chairman Byron. I'll tell you what is very disconcerting to me is the fact that we have gone down in otter activity. We couldn't even get enough recaptures to do a formal population estimate for the Green River within the Sitzkati National Wildlife Refuge because we could not get enough samples to genetically identify individuals. That is very disconcerting to me. Had we been at the level that we were in 2010 and 2011, when my other student did his master's, I would have been less concerned. But we have gone to about, I would estimate just by the numbers, 25% of activity that we had a decade ago. That is a disconcerting trend. And when I compare it to what we have in Yellowstone and how the otters are responding to the continued stresses of lake trout, they're not, the Yellowstone National Park used to be an otter source, a source of otters. We see that from the genetics, that a lot of the Shoshone and the Snake River otters came from Yellowstone. But now the population in Yellowstone is so low that it's not a source population any longer. So all these trends are very disconcerting at the moment.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so in follow-up to that, then are we concerned about genetic diversity then?
Excellent question. Thank you, Representative Provenza. The otter population in the Snake and the Upper Green River is very genetically limited. The population in the Lower Green River, because the reintroduction in Utah involved animals that were brought from various parts of the country, from Washington, from Alaska, Louisiana, they have more genetic diversity. And also the animals that are moving from Colorado, northern Colorado, to the North Platte, in the Saratoga and the Laramie River, have more genetic diversity. They mainly look like California-derived otters. Again, the reintroduction in surrounding states may be saving us genetically.
Thank you, committee. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Dr. Ben David. Really appreciate your comments. So Teton County, as not everyone may be aware, is we actually do have a water quality issue. It's a wet place compared to the rest of the state. The water table is quite shallow, and we are finding the presence of E. coli throughout the community, frankly, because we have a lot of septic systems and packaged plants, some of which probably need to be replaced, and homeowners haven't done that. And so needless to say, this is a concern for our human population as well, as Mr. Chairman knows well. But I am curious kind of how you think about that issue related to the otter population and whether you think there's a connection there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Storer. I have to admit that I serve on the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission in addition to all my other work. And so we are following the water quality issues in Teton County very closely because we don't want to repeat the mistakes that have been done there in Albany County. So thank you for that. River otters are extremely sensitive to pollution. One of the reasons that we consider them indicator of environmental health is because They feed mainly on fish, and they bioaccumulate toxins, both heavy metals and PCBs and aromatic hydrocarbons. We also see a lot of bioaccumulation of artificial medication, such as estrogen, that is not is designed not to break down and actually affects a lot of fish reproduction. And otters are especially sensitive to this. Even when you have a successful or thriving fishery, the otters may not be doing so well because of a set of liver enzymes in mammals, in general mammals, but especially in otters that eat a lot of fish, that break the toxins and make them actually more toxic. And a lot of the reproductive failures that we see in otters, especially otters that can't feed on other food sources, is because of the fish don't have these enzymes. The otters do, the fish bioaccumulate the toxins, the otters feed on these fish, and then their enzymes break them down, make them even more toxic. And so that's why internationally, we designate otters of all species, all 13 species, as indicators of water quality. So I would definitely monitor otter population in Teton County and Upper Green River, Lincoln County, and Sublette County for water quality. That's what we use them for. In fact, in our study in 2010 and 2011, the New Fork River, which has the best habitat for otters in the Upper Green River, I'm sure you're aware of that, we only found otters above the Pinedale anticline and Adjona Field, only above Boulder. And only 5 otters were in there. We had to do all our population estimates excluding those 5 because they messed up they actually lowered our population estimates because there were so few of them. And another study that I've done with the Colorado Division of Wildlife and Parks, we found that the Gunnison River has a break in otter distribution because there is a gold mine that used arsenic to extract the gold, and the otters could not handle there were fish, people fished there, but the otters were gone. They were still missing. So otters are a really important indicator of environmental health, and I think as long as you guys see otters in Teton, you may be okay, but it definitely is worthy monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Store, for the question. Thank you, Doctor. Any other questions from the committee? Appreciate that greatly. Thank you for coming to share all of your knowledge on the otters, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chairman.
If there's anyone else in the public that plans to testify today, come sneak up in these chairs. We're going to go to our second most patient public comment right here, and then we do, I believe, have a few online. So as you begin to make your public comment, please note that. And sir, please introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Greg Hunter. I'm from Laramie, Wyoming. And I want to first say how excited I was when I found out that the incoming 68th legislature was basing their bills on the Bible. My childhood prayer was to understand the Bible. Due to my rearing as a Southern Baptist church, I have had the freedom to explore the book and find evidence of its truth as I matured in the world. Like Saul, I've come to understand that if the elected do not enshrine into law Genesis 1, then we are doomed to Revelation. Quoting Proverbs does not mean that you aren't the wolf bearing false witness, gavel or not. Genesis 1 is a fantastic opening to the good book, as the creation of the universe all the way down to the arrival of man is described in perfect evolutionary sequence, as the fish in the sea are celebrated one day, just one single day before the animals on land. In Genesis 1, God makes one request of man, just one request, and that is to ensure that all species be fruitful and multiply. The implication is that it should not be just man to multiply. Do not forget the plants, as we were promised plants. I see no evidence, nor have I heard a religious figure make the claim that those professing belief should not be held to the standard of keeping God's first request to man. To offer proof, and unlike Pastor Harrelson, my pastor, Richard Mulkey of Forest Hills Baptist Church, had his sermons typed out, and I have 5 where he interprets Revelation. I can make them available, and they can be considered prophecy if this body would entertain a motion. We are clearly on the path to revelation, and yet this legislature, trumpeting godly guidance, brings this bill. How can this legislature divide God's creation and ignore God's first request? Where are the bills ensuring that animals saved by Noah should be fruitful and multiply? I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Committee, questions for Mr. Hunter? Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Please introduce yourself for the new committee members. Mr. Garrett, and great to see you.
Thank you very, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Richard Garrett. I'm representing the Greater Yellowstone Coalition here today, and I'm very happy to be here, grateful to be here. Just very briefly, and I'm going to read this so I don't make a mistake, but the mission of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition is to work with all people to protect the lands, waters, and wildlife of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem now and for future generations. I don't want to be repetitive. I think that we've heard some great testimony already, great questions. I really applaud this committee for its quest, its thirst, its hunger for knowledge. Dr. Merav Ben-David has offered astonishing information, new to me for sure, and just shows me once again how little I really know, despite my age. Speaking of my age, these animals have been protected, as I believe you know, since 1953. Ironically, that was in a session that was the first of my lifetime. I wasn't there, but it was the very first session of my lifetime. I think that we all stand on the shoulders of some people that really looked into the future on behalf of future generations to protect not just this species, but several others that are included in that bill. Evidence of that protection is found in a book that was published about 8 years ago by a friend and a scholar, Dr. Steve Buskirk, out of the University of Wyoming, whose research established that all 117 mammals that had been on the Wyoming landscape at the time of our statehood were still present in our state. That's a remarkable record of success and one of which we can be enormously proud. We are on a road towards success for recovering this particular species, but that road has a fork in it. And we could very much accidentally take the wrong fork in that road and turn back to a point where this otter is no longer available and serving the ecosystem in a way that will benefit not only its own life, but those of others that live on that landscape and our future generations. So for now, and reluctantly, I ask you to turn this bill down. The Game and Fish Department is very much a part of the success story that we enjoy in Wyoming in terms of species management. You need only look at all these wonderful pictures around this room and around our Capitol to see overwhelming evidence of the success of the department. And that success is ensured through science, research, study, and contributions from the public. And I can't say that our organization, Greater Yellowstone Coalition, is ready at this point to support additional research and the funding of research on behalf of this species. But we have supported this kind of research in the past, and I will do everything I can to make sure that our organization continues to participate in making sure that this species is a viable one for future generations. So again, I appreciate you all doing what you're doing. You're really humbling me, honestly, with your questions and the way that you're seeking to find the right answer. I think that this bill was brought in the spirit of doing the right thing for Wyoming, and I look forward to helping you continue to do the right thing for Wyoming. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Garrett, and thank you for all of your work since that very first session, a few decades ago.
I wish I could report that to my mother.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Garrett? Okay, we do have one online, so we're going to work on getting that testimony coming from online. I will remind the committee it is 1:10 as that clock flies off, and this has been a great first bill for me to manage my expectations on what we may or may not get done this session. And it doesn't end in this room. That includes the body that we all sit in upstairs. So with that, do we have a hand raised? Can we bring in the public testimony, please? And if you can hear us, please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the committee members. My name is Madhu Anderson, and I'm here on behalf of Wyoming Wildlife Protection Group. I oppose HB 0045 because removing otters from their protected status poses a threat to their population and can negatively impact Wyoming's aquatic ecosystems. It will be helpful if an inventory of otter population is conducted in key riparian areas throughout the state prior to issuing trap permits, because otters are often trapped when beaver are the target. It's concerning that the Wyoming Game and Fish Department currently depends on passive reports of otter sightings and bycatch reports for data collection for otter population. So definitely more research is required before removing otters from the protected status. Another thing is, if otters causing issues in certain areas like Lincoln County, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department should collaborate with pond owners to find ways to deter otters from inhabiting areas near their ponds. Like Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has an excellent pamphlet that offers guidance on coexisting with otters. To protect otter population in Wyoming, as a Wyoming resident, I stand firmly against HB 0045. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Committee, anything for our electronic testimony? Okay, hearing none and having no one else in the room, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Look to my committee. What's your pleasure? One reminder for the committee, and I was really bad at it not that long ago, for our folks online that can't hear, and I forgot to say this, but yeah, can we use our mics? Representative Connolly.
Apologize for that. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the bill.
Bill has been moved by Representative Connolly,
Second.
seconded by Representative Campbell. Okay, for me and for all of us, and I can lean on senior members on this committee here, we are going to now what we call work the bill. I am going to go ahead as the bringer of the bill, offer some thoughts as to the intent. It was mentioned by numerous folks testifying that this somehow came from someone that owns a trout pond. This bill came from me. I don't own a trout pond. Not one trapper and not one trout pond owner contacted me about this bill. And Representative Storr, who's a fellow angler and a good friend, I will say, that she brought up Fish Creek and some of our many issues with water quality in Teton County. This bill was thought of as I was fishing on Fish Creek, which has E. coli, watching an otter eat fish. So I just, as I heard testimony, I thought it was very appropriate to do that. We continued to hear testimony, and thank you to the agency for really clarifying what this bill does and does not do through Chapter 52. And at this time, I think it's appropriate to work the bill as long as we want. As our friend Representative Harshman said, do not get in a rush. And I'm sorry he can't be here. So I think Representative Provenza Go ahead.
I have a quick question for you, Mr. Chairman. Did you consider maybe getting some fishing tips from Representative Storr, just becoming a better fisherman?
The invite has been open for a while, and I'm beginning to wonder if she thinks I even fish. Thank you, Representative Provenza. Thank you, I was looking for that. Go back to where I really where I like to be. Yep, as always. Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want, I guess for clarity, the way I read this bill, it doesn't say that we are going to go out, the department's not going to go out carte blanche to say we're going to start trapping, killing otters all over the place. The way I understand the bill, this is just allowing them to have additional tools available to address conflicts. And I think it's been brought up, it doesn't have to be lethal. We've got other ways, but I do think in order to move forward, and in my mind, in order to provide some relief from areas where we're having it, I think we do need to give them the tools. I would like to see otters everywhere they used to be. And I know, or I believe, the only way that's going to happen is if we collect the data. And it's been said, Dr. Ben David said, we got to know why they're not expanded. And the only way we're going to know that is by, I think, giving the Game and Fish Department the authority to look more into this. I'm one that I think it was probably warranted at one time to put otters under some, and it's important to understand they're not under federal. This is not a federal list. This is something the state of Wyoming did. And I think it speaks accolades to the department. They're very serious about the task that they have to manage the wildlife. And so to me, I just want to make it clear, this is not just throwing the floodgates open and we're going to kill every river otter we possibly can. This is providing a tool to the department. So like I said, I came here as a no, because I've talked to a lot of trappers. I used to represent sportsmen, and it's not necessarily a sportsman's issue or a trapping issue, but I do think it's a game and fish issue, and I want to give them the tools. So I would encourage the committee to pass this bill forward. Thank you.
Representative Wharf, thank you. And to be noted, Representative Wharf is not new to the body. He previously served and has a rich history and background with wildlife-related issues. I'm going to start on the end out of the respect for time, and Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I don't oppose the idea of allowing Game and Fish to have a tool to do more science and data-driven information so that they can come to this committee with a full report, which I think, we got some really good data from Dr. Ben David. The problem, though, is that this bill doesn't just do that, right? This bill provides anyone the opportunity to set traps for otters. Am I incorrect in my understanding of the bill? I mean, there's a way that we can do that, but this doesn't say that this is for just game and fish. So we can potentially amend that, and I think we would need to amend it here. But this isn't just for game and fish, and that's I think the concern that the public brings is there's not really any. We're not dipping our toe in it. We're just opening the gate. And sure, maybe we're not going to have 1 million people out trying to capture all of our river otters and butcher them and go crazy, but there's not a protection to say, why don't we see what the data suggests? Let's allow Game and Fish to do the information, get that for us in a manner that makes sense, allow them specifically to maybe trap and then move forward. This bill is a vast expansion to everybody. I'm going to need some explanation from how this only applies to game and fish because it's not clear in the bill.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. At this time, I would like to invite the agency back up to offer clarifying questions if they so choose. I don't want to put them in the spot, but certainly as the author, I can comment on that, but I think it's appropriate to have our agency respond to that. Thank you. Director again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I'm going to let the best person clarify how a Chapter 56 permit would work under this.
So Chairman Byron, Representative Provenza. So if the bill passes as is, they would be listed under Chapter 52 as a non-game, and the only way they could be taken under that Chapter 52 is with a permit issued through the department. So it would not open it up to just anybody to go trap them or move them on their own. They would have to apply to the department for a permit in order to do that.
Thank you for that clarity. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess maybe some of my concern still then is, the testimony that you provided was that you don't have necessarily data right now to know exactly what our populations look like. And you want to see otters at previous populations, but that there are other issues in terms of like public support of otters or there's politics involved in how we do our game and fish tags, right? And how we decide who can hunt where, and how many people can hunt. Is that accurate, that there's at least the political component in issuing how many people can get tags? You have to weigh the public's wishes with data science.
Correct. Chairman Byron, Representative Provenza. And so I don't see it as us issuing tags for it. It may be an agency it may be us that goes in and moves them. So it wouldn't be issuing a license like for a trapper. It would be on a case-by-case basis where we may issue, in the very end, we may issue it to a landowner to remove an otter, but what we would try to do first is through department personnel to go trap and relocate or come up with mitigation. So it would not be an open license that somebody could apply for, but we would evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Provenza, for the question. Oh, Representative Jarvis, sorry.
And this just is a clarifying question. Oh, sorry. Mr. Chair. Chairman and Game and Fish, thank you for coming to answer these questions in clarity. So it's the clarifying question with the way that this bill is written as is, there is no other way for otters to go into any other category other than, and I heard kind of Chapter 52, 56, it is 100% for sure that that's where it goes and that you will be the managing body.
Chairman Byron, Representative Jarvis. So as Chapter 52 is currently written, if they are not designated in a status and statute, then they by default fall into Chapter 52 under what we call the non-game regulation. And under that non-game regulation, there's different categories there, but there is no take allowed under the non-game regulation without a permit. And so as they are currently listed as a protected species, we don't have the ability to do any kind of management with them right now, other than the work that like Dr. Merav and David did. And so this gives us a tool to be able to, as an agency, even go in and trap and move, where right now we cannot do that under the protected status.
Representative Jarvis, follow up.
Chairman, so is there a way to kind of build on Representative Provenza that we put in to ensure that this goes into Chapter 52?
Thank you, Representative Jarvis. It's my understanding from that comment, it absolutely will go. There is no need for that. I wouldn't want to speak for the rest of my committee, but that's where it will go. And under that, it will not change, and we've talked about this prior to committee and to other folks that have concerns. The day this passes, and if it goes into law in July, it doesn't change anything. They will still absolutely, every single person will have to go through Game Fish, is my understanding. So.
Okay. And the Chairman, the question was more centered around as this bill travels, should it be should it pass today? There's no amendments that could be put that would classify.
Well, Representative, you are welcome to bring any amendments to today, but we can also amend it along the way. So, yeah, I don't, and I will ask real quick when we're done having comments about any amendments we may have, but if I'm missing your question, you can clarify, but there will be more opportunities. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for clarification, you can bring amendments. Committee is the only place where you can kind of substantially amend a bill if say you want to put some parameters on there and it's not, doesn't fit in the short title, and I'm not sure whether your proposed amendments would or would not, but committee should understand as new members, you can't make amendments to a bill on the floor that don't fit specifically in the title of the bill. If it comes out of that, then you have to do it in committee where we can then debate it here and we have more ability to do so.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. I'm going to go back to Representative Connolly, and then I'm going to go to Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the act title itself, it says the act relating to game and fish, removing otters from the definition of protected animals for purposes of hunting regulations. That's, she answered me, that's 52. So that could be somewhat troublesome if people think that this is going to allow for hunting. I mean, when I think of somebody hunting otters, that doesn't seem right, but to mitigate a problem, to hopefully relocate the otter or do mitigation things like the doctor said, with electric fences and things like that. But to actually hunt the otters, I mean, is that gonna happen?
Thank you, Representative Connolly, and I do think Representative Worf can comment on that, and we can certainly, let me hear from Representative Worf, and then we can bounce to the agency.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for on behalf of the department, but I know a lot of these issues just because of my background. And I can tell you, I can see there's a lot of trepidation. People are concerned that we're just going to start killing otters. The game and fish is not surrendering their statutory responsibility to manage wildlife. They're not saying anybody can go out and trap, shoot, however they want to get them. That's not what this is doing. This is taking a species that currently is set to the side, that they are told they can't really do much with it. It's protected. What they need to do is they need to take it out of the protected class and move it over to this other category. Like I said, the hunting regulations, that's what the Game and Fish does. That doesn't mean, we don't hunt every wild animal in the state. But what this does is it changes the designation, puts that animal in a different category, and it relieves some of the pressures. Think about it in this way. If you are a private landowner and you're approached by the Game and Fish and they say, we got to protect the species we want to put on your property, the likelihood of those landowners welcoming that as a possibility because of the restrictions that come with that is very marginal at best. So it really is kind of taking the monkey off their back. They're no longer having to go to somebody and saying, look, it's protected. As a protected species, it's harder for them to move it around, put it places. By changing that category, it gives them the ability to, I think, and it isn't without concern. I'm concerned with what Dr. Ben David said. If there's a biological reason why they're not populating areas where they should be, obviously we don't want to trap them and relocate them to where they're going to die. But we got to give the department the ability to move them around. And that's one of them, is finding somebody that's willing to accept river otters. They're going to have to put it on somebody's property, or they're going to have to go to the federal BLM or Forest Service federal agencies. I would believe, and I can't speak for them, but I would believe it's much easier for them to work with private landowners in relocating river otters than to try to work with the federal agencies.
Thank you, Representative Worf, and I do want to respect the agency's time, and they're sitting up here, maybe sit up here until we get to a vote if we do, but Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I guess then my concern too is then, great, if this is for specifically to allow Game and Fish to study this species, then why would we then not just remove the protections for the black-footed ferret, the fisher, the lynx, the otter, the pika, wolverine? I mean, so, yeah.
I will comment on that, Representative Provenza, because I didn't have any constituents ask me to do that, nor did I witness any of those animals in my country. I don't go much over 10,000 feet where a lot of them live, but yeah, that was not the intent of the bill, and that is not something I'm going to run. In committee, in respect for time, we started over here, and I kind of want to work my way down to Representative Storr. Do we have any more questions, comments? Representative Thayer, Representative?
No, I think everybody's addressed my concerns or
Perfect, thank you.
questions.
Representative Worf?
I'm good, thank you.
Representative Storr, my good neighbor to the north.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious whether this changes, two questions. I just want to make sure I clearly understand that you are not allowed to do a relocation under the current law. And I'm also curious whether taking them off the protected animal list would allow a trapper to do more with a non-target otter take that he might have. I heard that mentioned earlier, so I just wanted to make sure I understood that too. Like to use the fur or otherwise.
Chairman Byron, Representative Storr, you'd have to repeat the second half of the question for me, sorry.
Okay, the first, Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir. The first question was to be clear about what activities you can do currently under current law.
Chairman Byron, Representative Storr, so right now, the only way to do anything with otters is under a Chapter 33 research permit. And when you're having a conflict situation, it's pretty hard to tie it to research. And so our hands are pretty tied on moving them or taking any other action other than, as Dr. Ben David said, we have tried to do mitigation things with electric fence and things like that to try to mitigate. But as far as moving them or removing them, we don't have that tool currently.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Second question was, does taking them off the list provide more flexibility for a trapper to do anything with the animal should it be caught by accident in a trap?
Chairman Byron, Representative Storr, so if they incidentally catch it in a trap, that would be no change from how it currently is.
Okay.
It does not open the door for a trapping season or anything like that if they are listed in non-game.
Representative Storr.
One more question, Mr. Chairman, if I might. Should we be concerned with the cost of any of these relocations, given the budget constraints for non-game species management?
Chairman Byron, Representative Storr, that's a great question. I don't have a fiscal impact on how that would look. It's due to the complexity of case-by-case basis. There may only be one a year, which wouldn't take that much time, or there may be more than that in a year. And so I don't have a good answer for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are not open for public comment. I appreciate that, but we are going to move on with this bill. We've had a motion. We've had a second. We've gone through the list. Representative Campbell.
Call for the question.
Thank you, Representative Campbell. This will be a roll call vote. Please use your microphones.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 45. Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Connolly.
Aye.
Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Representative Jarvis.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
No.
Representative Storr.
No.
Representative Thayer.
Aye.
Representative Worf.
Aye.
Chairman Byron.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 6 aye, 2 no, and 1 excused.
Thank you. Real quick for the committee, you do have an absentee ballot in your folder. So if you have to run to a different committee, you can always leave. I'm fully fine with you leaving. Representative Provenza, that's why I sat you one away from me, not right next to me. We are going to move on to House Bill 73. And we are going to welcome our good friend, and colleague from over the Windy Mountains. And when he puts on his glasses, you can all see how I'm trying to channel him in my service. Thank you, Representative Larson. For the public that's listening on Zoom, we have moved on to House Bill 73, recreational safety rock climbing, sponsored by Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's fun to be here and listen to you. I would also just share with the new members of this committee, the freshman members of the committee, I was very impressed with the questions asked and the way you moved through that kind of a delicate bill. So well done. Mr. Chairman, just want to make sure we have a submission from some stakeholders that hopefully you all received in support of the bill and that you've had a chance to hopefully read. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've lived in Wyoming since 1980, and on Saturday mornings where I live, I used to grab my bag, my basketball, my shoes, and head down and play ball, come home, do the things. In my neighborhood now, where Becky and I are the grandparents and the neighborhood grandparents, Saturday morning I look out and the people are coming out of their houses with their bags, their ropes, and their climbing shoes. And it's really interesting and fun to see how that's changed. I have a former constituent, a landowner in the Wind River Canyon, that approached me with concerns on providing access to those who would like to rock climb on his property, and wanting to make sure that as a landowner, he's not putting himself in a delicate situation by allowing access to do that. As you look through two different statutes, in Title I, we have the Recreation Safety Act, which really says when you participate in recreations, there's some inherent risks. And they talk about such sporting activities, and one of those that they note in there is mountain climbing. Mountain climbing has had historically a very broad range or definition, but as these sporting activities evolve, that has kind of been redefined. And so mountaineering or mountain climbing and rock climbing is kind of bifurcated. And so to consider rock climbing, as mountain climbing, that is no longer applicable. But in this act, in 11123, it notes that any person that takes part in a sport or recreational opportunity assumes that inherent risk of that activity. And so we have that. And then we come over to 34.1 in Title 34, and we talk about in 34.19, and we talk about the liability of landowners for recreational purposes, and the concern that landowners have, and the concern that those people who recreate climbing rocks is that in Wyoming, there are a lot of great opportunities, not necessarily to mountain climb, but to rock climb. Wind River Canyon being a great example. Down around Jeffrey City, the Granite Mountains, great example, great opportunities. And as they approach landowners aren't opposed to that, but they're wanting to ensure that they're not putting themselves in a liability. And so this bill goes into both those acts and inserts in Chapter 1 in 122A, little Roman 3, it would insert rock climbing. And Mr. Chairman, we do the same thing in 34.19.101, where we go into that definition where they note some of the winter sports that landowners allow to take place, recreation sports that landowners allow on their properties, and we insert rock climbing in there. Now, it's important to note on the landowner's part, that's a non-fee access. If you start charging access, that changes the legal landscape considerably, completely. Okay, this is just Representative Provenza coming to Representative Wharf asking if she can go climb on those rocks. He says, sure, glad to have you. But if he starts charging, then that changes that landscape. That doesn't change the, and it doesn't change the existing statute for neglect on the landowner on the part of that as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Appreciate that. I see no other legislators in the room or electeds. Unless Representative Winter's here to testify on rock climbing, which I doubt. Let's go ahead and open public comment at this point. Public comment, go ahead and come sit up here next to Representative Larson, who may stay, may go. Thank you for taking time out of your other committee. And when we get into this public comment, those online, please get ready. We are at 1:41. We are asked to be back upstairs. I always said I would follow that, but I don't feel like following it right now. So if we go late, we go late. And let's go right to public comment in the room, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Aronowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Lawyers and Advocates for Wyoming, public interest, not-for-profit law firm. Neither for or against this bill. I think that Recreational Safety Act, landowner liability issues are going to come to this committee a lot. And just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you. If you look at subsection 3 on page 2 of the bill, you've got a pretty long laundry list going of activities here. You don't need to keep adding to it. If we agree that rock climbing is a sport or recreational opportunity, that it totally is, then you don't need to keep adding sports every session or twice a session. I know there's another bill in the Senate. I've worked with someone working on that bill to actually add language, commonly understood sporting activities, including but not limited to baseball, so that you don't have to keep doing this. But if you're adding rock climbing, you might as well add bouldering, like climbing without ropes, or ice climbing, or via ferrata stuff, and it can go on and on. Pickleball, dodgeball, kickball, like sports that aren't in there. So just those things are already covered because they're all already sports or recreational opportunities. The same thing with the Landowner Liability Act. If you let people onto your land to recreate for free, no matter what they're doing, hiking, biking, mountain biking, climbing, rock climbing, bouldering, it's covered. If they don't charge, they have no liability. So this may sound negative. It's not. It's already in there. It's already protected, whether you add the words or not. So add the words. It's fine. It's going to keep coming up like every session and committee bills and time. So for whatever that's worth.
Thank you for that comment. Repeat your last name. I know we've met, but just so I can say it correctly.
Aronowitz, just rolls off the tongue.
Aronowitz. Representative Campbell.
Mark is fine.
Representative Campbell.
So I understand, so as that subsection 3, if it were to say, sport or recreational opportunity means commonly understood sporting activities, and then we just eliminate 2 through 9, and similar recreational opportunities that include the use of private lands for or access to, it would just be an all-encompassing statement. And our landowners would not then have any liability, is what you're saying.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, I'm definitely not proposing undoing a huge chunk of the Recreational Safety Act, because everyone that's been coming in for the last decade, like, we want hunting, we want fishing, I'm not doing that, but yes, it's in there.
Thank you. And for the committee's note, as we get to some discussion, we do have 3 online, and I would like to respect the time that they spent the last 2 hours listening to aquatic bills, not climbing bills. So who am I missing here? Any other questions for gentlemen? Thank you, committee. Let's get any other one in the room like to comment? All right, let's go online when we can get Zoom teed up. And those online, when you do get asked to come into the room, please join the room and unmute yourselves and introduce yourselves and who you're representing or where you're from or both. It may be my prerogative to call on people. Let's start, it's a bit hard to see from this far away, but let's start with Ms. Goodwin. If you are ready, please go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself to House TRW.
Mr. Chairman, for having me here today. My name is Katie Goodwin. I'm the Western Regional Director and Policy Analyst for Access Fund. We are a national level nonprofit that works to preserve and protect access to rock climbing across America. We are very much in support of Bill HB 37. We work, as I mentioned, providing climbing access across the West, both on private and public lands, and have supported the inclusion of rock climbing specifically to 10 other recreational use statutes across other states in the country. So this would not be the first of its kind. Similar to hunting, the ability to have access to private property to recreate, but also providing a clear liability protective layer for the landowner is very valuable and providing uninhibited access. And so we really appreciate everybody's time and effort at looking into this today.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. Committee, any questions for Ms. Goodwin for taking time and commenting on this bill draft we are in front of today? Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. I am going to then go over to, and there's some comments on the bottom, but let's go to Ms. Rude. If you are ready, go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Chelsea. I'm the Event and Marketing Director with Central Wyoming Climbers Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization focused on protecting, educating, and also celebrating climbing in Central Wyoming. As a climber of 27 years, I have seen the sport of climbing grow. And as many know, climbing might seem like a very dangerous sport. And so I have seen a lot of climbing areas on private land not have access to the community. And I think that that's a really kind of a bummer. We have done, I'm so sorry. There was a local economic study done in 2021 by the University of Eastern Kentucky, and it revealed that in Lander alone, we brought in $4.5 million annually just from visiting climbers outside of Fremont Canyon. It would be really awesome if we had more accessibility to some of these climbing areas, such as in Wind River Canyon, to help bring in money to this to the state. I therefore am in favor of House Bill 00730. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rude. Committee, any comments or questions for Ms. Rude? I would like to point out that she just mentioned a number that's near and dear to our heart, $4 million for one activity in one part of our state. It really highlights what these outdoor activities are bringing in terms of economic value to the state. Thank you, Ms. Rudin. I'm going to go on to Mr. Thomas, who is by default either in Representative Storr or my district. So welcome. Thank you. We love to see some faces from where the mountains are tall. I'll let you take it from here. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, representatives and Mr. Chairman. I'm Charlie Thomas. I'm with board member on the Teton Climbers Coalition. We feel that allowing someone to recreate on private land is an act of generosity, and it's a great benefit for the people who get to go hiking or climbing or fishing. But we also feel that it also benefits the landowner. I think that giving, sharing their land with others is makes them happier. It's good for their soul, and it's good both ways. But I think many landowners, when it comes to climbing, are hesitant to share their land because they are worried about the liability they might incur. So I do feel like in this bill, pointing out climbing specifically as a case where they would not incur any liability would really help landowners to feel free to share their land. And I think that would really be beneficial to both the climbers and the landowners. So Teton Climbers Coalition, we're 100% behind the bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your testimony today. Committee, any questions or comments for Mr. Thomas? We do have an agency that has decided to jump up here, our friends from State Parks who are near and dear to TRW. I really appreciate you being here for these bills. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Floyd, Deputy Director, State Parks and Cultural Resources, and I'll be very brief. We do get inquiries from time to time from constituents who are interested in opening up their private lands for outdoor recreation. And one of the very first questions we get is in regards to liability. So we refer them to this act, and I understand it says included but not limited to, but a lot of times if it doesn't have their specific activity that they're interested in on there, it can be a little concerning. So, adding this rock climbing, distinguishing it from mountain climbing, as the representative said earlier, does make sense in a lot of ways. Those activities have deviated over time. They're kind of referred to separately in the profession. So that's probably a good thing from that perspective. One thing we're seeing in Wyoming, of course, is increased pressure on our public lands for outdoor recreation. And one strategy we have is to educate folks, to disperse them, and to concentrate them in sometimes. So EDC, we call that. It does make sense, I think, as we start to see more pressure on our public lands to see if there are opportunities on private lands, and we've seen that in some cases with recreational activities. So this seems like a good way to help make that happen. It also improves, of course, as was mentioned earlier, our economic diversification efforts. This is an important industry in the state, and adding that dimension that could help it out a little bit would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Floyd. Does anyone have any questions for the Deputy Director? Any more public comments in the room? Hearing none in the room and none online, we're going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. Committee, what is your pleasure? Representative Worf.
Move the bill.
Just hit his mic and to move the bill. Representative, I have a second from Representative Provenza. Okay, let's go ahead and work this good little bill from our friend from Lander. Let's start a little bit differently since I was getting used to this position. We're starting on page 1. Any amendments on page 1? Committee. Page 2, any amendments? Page 3, any amendments? Okay. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think to the comment that we heard from Mr. Aronowitz, it sounds like maybe we should look at this at some other point. But I support moving the bill forward the way it is for now until we can have kind of an overarching fix for landowners.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. Representative Connolly.
Mr. Chairman, I just need some clarification because I thought I just heard that this bill would open up private land. I don't think that's the intent of this bill, that it would cause the landowner to have to allow these kind of activities. So that
Thank
should be
you,
cleared up.
Representative Connolly. Yes, I will clear that up. This does not open up any private land. I think what State Parks was referring to, it just gives a level of protection for those that invite folks onto their private land. It does not in any way, shape, or form require or otherwise open up public land. It is not, and I do, Representative Provenza, that is a very good point. We get this a lot in TRW as we start to add more and more and more of these activities. And if our session was a lot longer, we could probably clean up this a little bit, but it is a very important part of our recreational attitude in Wyoming and recreating. So I appreciate that comment, and we should talk about that. Committee, any other comments? I've gone left to right. Representative Thayer?
Yeah, Chairman, I want to stress on the point that Deputy Director Floyd said about the stress on the public lands. This really is a ripple effect. We talked about the 4 million, one sport in one area. Ripple effect is people will then, for no fee, come onto these private lands. Then they will stay in a hotel, spend money. So this is a great addition of economic development.
Thank you, Representative Thayer. And Representative Storr, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a comment that if truly if there's commercial use involved versus non-commercial use, that might be something to think about also down the road in terms of identifying when a landowner is liable and when he's not.
Thank you, Representative Storr. Representative Jarvis.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to kind of reiterate something. I really appreciated the coming and letting us know that it does encompass everything. But I would also like to really encourage that it doesn't prohibit these really high-risk sports from being called out and named, because there is a difference when you're walking, you're standing at somebody's door telling them, no, really, it's covered. And they're like, okay, there's a list of all of these things, but rock climbing's not one of them. And because rock climbing is so risky by nature, by putting it in here, regardless if they're covered or not, I think it's very wise.
Thank you for those comments, Representative Jarvis. We did get a question before that. Representative Provenza called the question. So at this time, we will have a roll call vote for House Bill 73, Recreation Safety Rock Climbing.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 73. Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Connolly.
Aye.
Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Representative Jarvis.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
Aye.
Representative Stover.
Aye.
Representative Thayer.
Aye.
Representative Worf.
Aye.
Chairman Byron.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 aye and 1 excused.
Thank you. And to those online, just for the record, it is 1:58. So we are going to adjourn this meeting. Unfortunately, not being able to get to our third bill that we're going to hear today, which was House Bill 5. We will hear that bill first thing Tuesday upon noon adjournment. Thank you, everyone, for suffering through my first committee. And I appreciate that. And I do get to assign these bills out. So when we do get to the floor, maybe I don't get to, but I'm going to. I'm not going to give Representative Provenza the otter one. I'm going to give myself and Representative Worf the otter one. And our good friend Representative Lloyd Larson will take his good bill. And